Guys, I'm here in Fremantle Prison here in Western Australia. So guys, a lot of history going on with this Fremantle prison, so let's check it out guys and have a look today. I can't wait, it's my first time to come here as well, so let's go and have a look in what's inside guys. A lot of actually different tours when you come here guys, here in Fremantle Prison. So they have the convict prison tour, they have the behind bars tour or the true crime tour, the tunnels tour, and the torchlight tour. So there's a lot of tour to choose from if you come here. And these are the tour prices. What I choose today is the behind bars tours. So our tour gonna start now guys. Yeah, can't wait.
10:30, thanks guys, in you go. 10:30 is. Thank you. Thanks folks, try and grab a seat. Guys, first of all, my name's Ian. We're going to be together for the next hour and a quarter. We're going to talk about part of the prison's history. And I'm saying part of the history because there are two quite separate lives to this place. And you've chosen one of those lives. Your tour behind bars is about the second life of the prison. That is the modern prison that was still open in 1991. So we're talking the period 1886 right through to 1991. So still open in 1991 and not a pleasant place either. But there was an earlier life, guys. The first life was much worse, and I might just mention that first life to you briefly, just so you know the full picture before we concentrate on our main tour. And guys, that is that originally, the prison out the back we're going to look at, originally it was called the Convict Establishment, the Fremantle Convict Establishment. Guys, that's a name the old British government gave it. And many years ago, say about 200 years ago, all around Australia in their colonies, the old British government had quite a few of these convict establishments. Now, of course, in those days, we weren't even called Australia at all. We were a number of English colonies, like the colony in New South Wales, you know, where Sydney is nowadays. And over here around Perth and Fremantle, we used to be called the Swan River Colony. And we had one of those convict establishments too. It's out the back. Wait for us to have a look. Guys, these were places of punishment for prisoners who the old British government called convicts, to be sent all the way from Britain to the end of the earth, when you think about it. All the way down here, guys, thousands of kilometres away, all the way down here to be punished. Because back in Britain, they've committed some sort of a crime. Now, it was during Britain's big industrial revolution when Britain's jails were bursting full of petty criminals. And they wanted to get rid of a few and clear the jails out of there. Perfect solution, send them down to the colonies and make them do all the hard work. That's your punishment if you're a convict here. You do all the hard work, you're a free labour force. Because when they arrived here, well, the old British government thought there was nothing here. Well, indeed, no roads, no buildings, nothing like that. Thousands of kilometres of bush. But the Aboriginal people, of course, have been here for 50,000 years. It's a long time, isn't it, 50,000 years? Guys, they interacted with the environment, they had their systems, they had their ways of doing things for 50,000 years. In fact, the tribe that lived around Perth and Fremantle here, they were called the Wudjuk, which apparently means the keepers of the water, which I've always thought was a rather lovely title. But guys, when the old British arrived here, thousands of kilometres of bush everywhere. So as a new convict, you start your punishment by clearing the land. Quite literally, you're out there with an axe chopping down trees. And you're building roads, you're putting bridges over rivers. A convict's got to build every single building, every public works that was needed, because there's none of that stuff here. Well, the old convicts we got here at the Swan River Colony in 1850, they're the ones who built that prison out there. Done a fantastic job as well. It's an absolutely beautiful building. Look, unfortunately, it wasn't a beautiful place to be. Because if you're a convict here, guys, apart from having to do all the hard work, you do something wrong while you're here, the punishment systems here were brutal. And the isolation programs they put in place, quite stunningly cruel, really. Anyone been to Port Arthur Convict Establishment in Tasmania? No? Yeah, that's a bit grim, isn't it? Yeah, this is not quite as grim as Port Arthur, but getting close. Same lovely isolation ideas. Not a nice place. Look, luckily, that convict system didn't last too long here at the Swan Colony. It's only about 36 years. So by 1886, finished. So you want to know more about the convict era? You do another tour, okay? It's called Convict Prison, not surprisingly. Taking there to tell you about convicts. Guys, we're going to talk about what happened when the convicts left. Well, in 1886, the old British government handed ownership of this convict establishment to the little colonial government. Name was changed to Fremantle Prison, and really from that day onwards right through to 1991, they ran this place as what you'd call a modern-day maximum security prison. Still open in 1991. Now, no longer prisoners sent from Britain, of course, but it's just the locals. All the usual suspects that you're going to find in a maximum security prison. You know, the murderers and the robbers and so on. Unfortunately, though, they were up there with a whole bunch of kids. Guys, there were a lot of 13-year-old boys here, and they were much younger than that as well. And the reason was, at one stage, Fremantle Prison was the only prison in Perth and Fremantle, so they sent them all to the same place. Which is not a really good idea, is it? The other thing you're going to notice as soon as you go inside the old prison, guys, of course, you'll notice that it has hardly changed there at all since 1850. And if you were here in 1991, you lived in the same place, in pretty much the same conditions the old guys did in the 1850s. It was a very odd, basic place, even as a modern prison. But that's what we're going to talk about, Fremantle Modern Prison. Well, I suppose it is a modern prison, guys. It's 1985. This man here has just robbed a bank in the middle of Perth. They're going to send him here, aren't they? Yep. He's not denying anything, is he? Because they're going to send him here because it's the only prison in Perth and Fremantle. Now, of course, he's a new prisoner and he's going to enter the prison through the front gate. It's the same gate you just walked through then to buy your tickets. But he came through in a different fashion. He came through in a little bus. Because the little bus eventually backed up to that door there, and he and about 15 other prisoners got out, and they all sat on that bench there, just where you're sitting now, because in the modern prison, this little room here is called prisoner reception. This is where you start your journey, if you like. As you might imagine, this now means you find yourself sitting on the bench there with your 15 new friends. 15 very large, sweaty, naked men. Guessing that felt a bit strange, don't you think? I'm also guessing it might have been just a bit frightening as well. Especially if you're only a kid, probably a bit scary, isn't it? Guys, look, I'm afraid the whole process gets a lot scarier as it moves on. You might notice, for example, on the floor here, a little position's been marked. Guys, this is the position, the exact position where the prisoner would come to stand next in front of his new friends. And then a prison officer, wearing a rubber latex glove, would approach. And you probably know what's happening next, don't you? Yeah, he's going to examine that prisoner very carefully indeed because he thinks he's trying to smuggle in some drugs or some weapons. Prisoners are very good at that sort of stuff. Because after the detailed examination, they all head off through that door there to the shower block out the back because they want them all to have a good wash so that they can get changed into their new uniforms. Well, if you were here in the modern prison, that's what your uniform looked like. We used to call them prison greens for rather obvious reasons. Still exactly the same uniform in Western Australian prisons today. And of course you might notice, they're not orange, are they? That's only American TV, all right? Prison greens here. And they would have been made on site, made in the tailor's workshop right here on site, made by the prisoners themselves. Shoes or boots like these would have been issued, and of course they were made here too. They're made in the boot shop, made by the prisoners. There were heaps of workshops here actually where prisoners worked in the daytime learning new trades, which was rather important. Then they would get a plastic bag like this full of soap, toothpaste, shaving gear, all that sort of stuff. And off they go up there to start their new lives. Which is, of course, where we're going to be ourselves in just a minute. And when you get up there, look, all sorts of things to notice about the old place. I think one of the things you'll notice is that there's a lot of segregation of men in a modern prison environment. In other words, you just got to keep some men right away from the others. And there's lots of different reasons why. But that segregation process really, it started the moment prisoners walk in here to reception. Do you notice in the corner there's a little room? It was called the holding room. Looks like a glass booth, but it's called the holding room because that's a place to put a prisoner who you felt you really don't want to mix with these other guys for all sorts of reasons. Because one of the reasons might have been, quite simply, that the nature of his crime was so incredibly distasteful, without perhaps mentioning any details, he's even offended the other prisoners. Now you might know, but prisons have a very clear code of ethics, and there are just some things you don't do. And if you do, they'll kill you. And a fella like that, even while he was getting changed, had to be kept quite separate from the other fellas, and up there most certainly very separate indeed. You can admire the lovely 1960s tiles on the floor. There you folks, come on in. Yep, just there, that'll do you. Audio there, two numbers, thank you. 5 and 8. Okay guys, first of all, that rather beautiful old building over there, and I think it's beautiful, at least architecturally. Guys, I'll try not to keep it too long out here, we'll get out of the sun as soon as we can. But guys, that's the Convict Establishment. It was built by those old convicts all sent out from Britain and Ireland all those years ago. Because as I said, I've always thought they've done a great job. Sorry?
No, that's okay, go ahead.
I've always thought they've done a great job because it's all done by hand. Guys, there's no machines in those, there's no cranes, there's no power tools, so it's not a bad effort, is it? Guys, now they would have marched up to around this spot where we're standing in 1850, dug all the limestone rock out of the ground from underneath our feet here, and they used that limestone rock to build all sorts of stuff. Well, one of the things they built was that big wall over there to keep themselves in. That's what they did first of all. And then, guys, then they built all sorts of other things, and they built the prison. Now they started down that end in 1852, and in various stages, like they'll build a bit, move in, build another bit, move in, so in stages. From 1852 down to 1859, the old convicts built this. And they built it originally to house 1,000 men. Guys, 1,000 convicts, all kept in their own individual cells. The cells were quite small, they measured about 2 metres by 1 metre. And they're still there. I'll show you some of those when we go in. Now, do you know when the old convicts finished building that in 1859? That was the longest and tallest building in the southern hemisphere. Doesn't look it, does it? Goes to show you though, just how important that old British government thought the convict system was. They obviously thought it was important because they spent a lot of money on it. Now, a lot of additions to the old place over the years. Guys, first of all, there were no female convicts sent to the squatter of the colony. They're only men. But later on in the modern prison, there were some girls. That's one of the additions. Taller red brick building down the back behind the wall. Girls from 1890 to 1970, that's the women's prison. Guys, now, just mentioned earlier that little red brick building, just one of the many communal shower blocks that were here, and there's quite a few dotted around the grounds. Sorry for you, number 7. Guys, communal shower block, I do know in the more recent modern prison, shower nights were Monday, Wednesday and Fridays. So 3 nights a week, you and about 50 other prisoners at a time with your little towels and bars of soap, guys, you march off to a communal shower block like that, and I think they'd change of clothes twice a week. Guys, out behind that particular shower block, one of the many workshops that were here. And the workshop out the back was called the Cement Products Workshop. And that's where prisoners made cement pavers for footpaths, cement curbing for road edges, cement planter boxes, that sort of stuff. Guys, the little corrugated iron building around the side there, that's the Safety Products Workshop. That's where prisoners made safety equipment like, you know, those plastic safety helmets a mining engineer might wear. So that sort of stuff. Guys, up behind the green door there on the wall, 2 important workshops out the back, carpenter's workshop, mechanics workshop. We could learn those important trades. Guys, elsewhere in the prison we mentioned earlier, of course, there was a boot shop and a tailor's shop where they made their own uniforms. But there were heaps of workshops here in the modern prison, ranging from the workshop where the prisoners made paper bags of all things, but ranging right through to an electronics workshop where you could learn quite a sophisticated trade and everything in between. Guys, you could work in the hospital out the back as an orderly. You could work in the kitchen, learning how to be a baker or a cook or something like that. So guys, heaps of places to work. Now, as you might imagine, big demand for prisoners to want to work in a workshop because you're going to learn a new trade, aren't you? Well, there just never were enough positions. And it became somewhat of a privilege here for you to be able to get into a workshop. You're just going to have to prove you're a really well-behaved person, you're keen to get on, you've learnt your lesson. Because guys, the other attractive thing about working in a workshop, you're paid for doing so. Now, it wasn't much money. I'll give you an example. Guys, 1985, I know the best paid job was working in the kitchens out the back, for which you got $37 a week. Now, I know it doesn't sound like much money, but what it does mean is you've got some money and you can buy a few things to make your life here just a bit more comfortable. Now, you'd buy a television, wouldn't you, to put in yourself? Yeah. I thought so. He looked like he'd have a TV. I would. Yeah, TV, radio, wouldn't you guys? Because they bought little toasters and jaffle makers and all sorts of stuff. Just makes life more comfortable. Worst paid job I do know of in 1985, guys, the worst paid job here were the prisoners who had to rinse everyone's toilet buckets in the morning. They got $11 a week. I've always thought they deserve more. At least danger money, don't you think? But guys, do you know the real advantage of working in a workshop? Apart from learning a trade and getting paid, guys, the real advantage was, if you didn't, you've got to sit in the big yards out the back back behind each division is a yard. You sat out there in that yard all day long with maybe 100 other prisoners. And generally, they're the most violent men you've ever met. And you can imagine, it's not going to be a good day sitting out there, is it? No, they're going to beat you up, they're going to do all sorts of things. And I've always thought, you're a smart prisoner, you find yourself a job in a workshop somewhere else. There's lots of stuff to do in the daytime and limit the time you sit out the back. Come on through, we'll have a look. Thanks guys, obviously the kitchen. Now, audio. Oh, there it is. Number 20. Guys, so the kitchen. Part of the kitchen where they cook the food, obviously. Guys, where we walked through over there, that's where they did all the washing up. And behind the glass panelling, well, that's where the baker had his ovens. Behind me, that little room, guys, that's the food preparation room. All the cool rooms and fridges and things like that are out there. And it's quite a big area, isn't it? Guys, now the prisoners themselves did the cooking. And as you might imagine with prisoners cooking, hardly gourmet little food, was it? Guys, the other thing, of course, mass-produced food, whether it's a prison or a hospital or the army, is never much good, is it? And I do know that over the years here, there were actually 2 big riots here just over the lousy food. I mean, I'm sure it was nutritious, it just apparently didn't taste good. Guys, but a busy place, the prisoners would have made in excess of 4,500 meals a day here. So it's pretty busy. Interesting thing about the food situation here. Even if you're a prisoner through this food preparation room behind me, a little audio recording will come on, and apparently it was recorded in the food preparation room in 1989, and you can tell from that just how loud it was. I mean, it's all the banging and crashing and shouting, it's the activity, isn't it, of the prison. Very noisy place. Come on, Fred. Guys, the prisons themselves were divided into those divisions according to the crime that they had committed. Once the old convicts left here, and then for many years afterwards, in fact right up to 1973, Division 1 was a juvenile centre for boys aged 13 to 17. But sadly I do know, looking at the records, that the youngest boy here at Fremantle in the modern era was 8 years old. 8? Yeah, 8. Because he was 1890, it's modern prison.
What did he do wrong?
Well, he was here twice. First time for stealing some money. Got 3 days in prison and 8 strokes to the birch. Guys, they gave him a thrashing. He's back a couple of months later because he stole some oranges. Another 3 days in prison and another 8 strokes to the birch.
Didn't learn his lesson.
No, sent him off to a boys' reformatory in the end. But yeah, not that long ago really. Guys, after the boys left, after 1973, Division 1 became a place for some of those men I mentioned to you earlier. You're the guy in the change rooms that put him in the corner by himself because of the nature of his crime. Well, that became a place for those sort of fellas. You had to put them right away from everyone else for their own safety, basically. It's the nature of the crime. Guys, another time, Division 1 was a remand centre, and remand usually means you're here only quite briefly. You're probably only here for 4 or 5 weeks. You're on remand and you're waiting to have your case heard somewhere. Out the back of each division, guys, is a yard. This is Division 1's yard we're standing in. It's quite a small one. There are much bigger yards over there. Guys, very much a modern prison thing, these yards. These are a place for prisoners to sit during the daytime if they're not doing something else. But they're also very much exercise areas. Guys, a small yard like this, well, there's enough room to play volleyball. In fact, you might see the remains of the volleyball net support poles over there. Guys, the bigger yards, well, a lot more room. They played tennis, they played basketball, they did that sort of stuff. But guys, they also had all their gym equipment out there. So we had punching bags hanging from the rafters. They've got all their weights and things out here, working out, basically getting bigger and muscly and scarier, I suppose. Because they sit around these tables also, and these are not dining tables, but a place just to sit during the daytime and talk and play cards and yeah, play chess and do stuff like that. Which all sounds rather nice, actually, doesn't it? But don't forget, you're sitting out here with some pretty violent fellas most of the time. And that's where I suggested before, if you're smart, look, you're probably going to find yourself a job in a workshop, don't you think? Go and learn a new trade, limit the time out here. And the other thing was at Fremantle, there were just lots of other things to do during the daytime. Guys, you could go to art classes, you could go to various exercise classes, you could spend most of the day in the library actually studying, improving your education. Guys, there's lots of stuff to do instead of sitting here. But a lot of prisoners did prefer just to sit here all day long, sat here all day long with their scary friends. Didn't want to learn art class, go to art classes, guys didn't want to learn how to be a mechanic, just sat here with their friends. I'm guessing they might have been the ones who were in a gang. Now there's a lot of gangs in prison, and I guess that's one way to survive, isn't it? There's a bunch of other guys to look after you. But if you're not in a gang, I don't think I'd want to sit here. Okay, let's move on. Thanks guys, come on in. Now, Division 2's yard, it's bigger than Division 1, isn't it? And Division 3 over there is even bigger. Guys, you're sitting out here in Division 2's yard, busy morning, say it's 1985. Now, on a really busy morning, you might sat here with about 100 other prisoners. How many guards do you reckon you might need to watch 100 prisoners sitting in a yard? Do you have any ideas? 5, pretty precise. It's not bad actually. Yeah. He knows it's a government department at least, doesn't he? Well, he's close. No, there's one guard, guys. He's over there behind that little iron cage. Do you think they would have armed him with a weapon? Has he maybe got a shotgun?
I think so.
No, you don't arm guards with weapons down here. Apparently prisoners have a habit of beating them up and taking the weapon off. No, he's armed with a whistle. That's what he's got, the whistle. But guys, you can imagine, can't you? Say it's 1985, this prisoner sitting out here minding his own business. 5 other prisoners grab him, drag him up the back, start beating him up. Very common thing. The guard would have come out of his box to save him? No, of course not. He doesn't want to get beat up either, does he? But no, he blew his whistle till eventually he attracted about 10 or 12 other guards. Maybe the special handling unit who were adept at coming out and saving people. Guys, this took some time though, didn't it?
Yeah,
10 minutes, I don't know. It's a long 10 minutes.
it's not a big thing.
It is, but yeah, a long 10 minutes. Guys, interesting history, Division 2 as well. Do you know from early colonial days, in fact from 1838 and then through to 1904, guys, Aboriginal prisoners were kept quite separate from the other fellas, at first in their own separate prison. Now, do you know a little island off the coast called Rottnest? Yeah. Yeah, lovely little holiday place now, of course. Wasn't a holiday then, it was a prison for Aboriginal men. Guys, this is Division 2 inside, of course. This is exactly the way the prison looked in 1991 today. Now, the thing is, though, it really doesn't look that much different. Guys, all that iron railing you also see on the different landings and levels, down the stairways, guys, that's actually off the top decks of the old sailing ships with all the old guys out here, because when those ships arrive, they used to strip them down and use the bits to help build the prison. So it hasn't changed much at all, really. Guys, now, if you were here in modern prison, though, here's a timetable to give you a little idea of the sorts of things you might have done during the week. Well, let's say it's 1985. Guys, you can see, of course, reasonably early wake up at 6:45, 7 o'clock, cell doors were all unlocked, and the prisoners came out to go to those yards out the back to clean their teeth and have a shave, do those sorts of things. They also emerged from their little cells on the way out the back to empty this. Guys, I'm afraid right through to 1991, that's your toilet. Can you imagine a lovely Perth summer's day of say 40 degrees? You've got about 1,500 of these bubbling quietly in the background. Guys, it's stinking. You can smell it from the front gate. I've always thought that's a bit basic for a supposedly modern prison that was opened in 1991. Don't you think? Guys, after those procedures, prisoners all come back to be locked into their cells because they're now having breakfast. Remember they eat all their meals alone in their cells? Having breakfast now. Guys, after breakfast at 8:30, all came out again. And they're either going off to art classes or going off to learn how to be a mechanic or whatever. You don't want to do that, you just sit in one of those yards all day. So you start the day. Now, the other thing I've noticed about the timetable, guys, I think prisoners would have spent an awful lot of time really just sitting in their cells. Do you notice at 4:15 in the afternoon, it's lock-up time again. So you're actually sitting in there quite a lot, aren't you? Now, the other thing you might have noticed, all around the prison, guys, attached to the walls are these little coloured boxes. And they're there because if a prisoner wants to do pretty much anything, he's going to have to fill out a form of some sort, a request. Well, guys, say he wants to buy something. Well, he's not going to the shop, is he? But he fills out a form called a spend slip, requesting maybe the prison buys him a radio, say. Guys, he puts that request in the green spend slip box, and the prisoner will go and buy that item for him. Say he wants to transfer some money out of his bank account. Well, he's not going to the bank, obviously, again, but he fills out a form called a C63. He puts it in the C63 box, and the prisoner goes and does his banking. And in the days when people wrote letters, guys, of course, there's a letter box, and those letters were censored. And you can imagine, can't you, any threatening comments, any foul language, not going to be well received. So, guys, there's boxes like this all around the place for requests and forms of all sorts. Okay, come on down again. Now, folks, I think I've come to look at this prison as though it was a small city. I think it's like a small city, really, because it's just got lots of facilities in here, just like a city has. Well, guys, there are 2 big churches here on site for the prisoners. There's a big hospital, movie theatre, library upstairs that had 10,000 books in it. You start looking around the place, you see dental surgery, psychiatrist rooms, all that sort of stuff. There's even a morgue here for the dead ones, just as a city would have. And over there is the barber shop. Guys, you go have your hair cut by a prisoner wielding some scissors. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? I'll just comb what's left of my hair lock. But guys, you're a bit of a city, really. And in Prison City, of course, guys, you can imagine, you do something wrong while you're in Prison City, there's going to be a punishment, isn't there? At least here at Fremantle in the modern era, punishment was not hard physical stuff. Not like the old convict days. Guys, it tended generally to be fairly small. And it often revolved around the withdrawal of a privilege. And they might say, well, right, you're not going to the movies for 2 months, okay? Taking your radio off you for a month. Guys, it sounds small, but if you're stuck in a little cell, you lose your radio or your TV. I would imagine it's quite a severe punishment. 4. Now, the interesting thing is, guys, the gallows where they used to hang them, still here. I'll take you in a minute, it's just around the corner. I'll show it to you, but I'll explain how it works. Heads up to mum and dad, going to the gallows, but they used to hang people if you're happy for certain people to come in and see that. That's all. They don't have to, that's all I'm saying. So go to the gallows first. This way. Okay. Thanks, guys, and you go. Thanks, guys. Hop inside. Number 2. So yeah, guys, of course, that floor is in the open position. It's a trap door. The hangman would pull that big heavy iron lever on the other side. The floor just drops out from underneath the prisoner's feet. Do ignore that wire grill that's in the pit there. It's not normally there at all. Guys, it's only been added as a safety consideration. But let's imagine the floor's closed. It's like a normal flat floor surface. Well, guys, if you're the man going to be hanged, you start off down the other end of the prison, a place called death row. Now, we didn't keep people on death row very long at Fremantle. There's no sitting there for 20 or 30 years like most places. Now, you're here generally very briefly. You're probably only here for about 6 months. Guys, you've been found guilty of murder. You have an appeals process that takes about 6 months. Not successful? Gone. They do not muck around. The morning they're going to hang this guy, 6 o'clock in the morning, marching from death row to a building out the back called solitary confinement, and they put the prisoner in cell number 1. And guys, the prisoner spends the last 2 hours of his life in cell number 1. That's where he got his last meal. They gave him a nice new set of clothes to be hanged in, so he's got to get changed. He spoke to his reverend, his priest, he's doing those sort of things. Then after all those procedures, they offered him either 2 glasses of brandy, or perhaps scotch if you preferred. Apparently this was to help steady your nerves. I don't think that would have worked for you, 2 glasses of brandy. Well guys, they all know that at 1 minute to 8 there are 4 guards coming to get them. It took 60 seconds to march you from cell number 1 to be standing under that nurse. Now they would have paused briefly outside that little door on the way through, just long enough to pull a little cloth hood down over his head so he can't see all this stuff. And I'm sure too, so the guards don't have to look at his face. But straight through to the nurse, because that rail on the other side didn't used to be there, so it would have been open access, wouldn't it? Now, the 4 guards who came over here with the prisoner, now that they're in this room, they have a rather special job to do. Their job is to hold the prisoner still. Because as you might imagine, he doesn't particularly want to go, does he? Well, to do that, 2 guards went to this iron rail over here. There was 1 guard at either end of the rail. 2 guards over there, 1 at either end of the rail. They called these guys the corner men. And they would have moved a couple of these wooden planks over a bit further. And this is also the guard can hang onto that rail with 1 hand to steady himself. And he'll lean out as far as he can. Guys, he rests one of his feet on the plank, so he doesn't fall down the pit with the floor opens, obviously. But they've still got 1 hand free, these guards, and they all lean forward as far as they can. Guys leaning out to the prisoner, and they've got him on the shoulder, basically. They're holding him up, right to the moment that floor drops. Can you imagine doing that? If you were a prison officer, it'd be very hard, wouldn't it? Can you imagine just for a moment, though, how terrified the prisoner is? Well, a lot of them are so frightened, apparently they just physically couldn't stand up. Guys, that's why there's a chair here. That's the original old chair there. That if a prisoner couldn't stand up, well, they just sit him on the chair underneath the noose. With a few adjustments, guys, they hang him sitting down instead. For some reason, sounds a lot worse. Guys, this little gallows was built in 1888. That is modern prison, and this was only used in the modern era. Guys, for some reason, in the old convict days here, they never had gallows on site. So you won't hang an old convict in 1860. You would have to send him off to the old Perth jail in Central Perth. You're going to hang him there. I did notice though. Guys, when the old Perth jail closed in 1887, they're building this little gallows. They bought one little item with them from Perth jail. Bought the original hanging beam, that one up there that the rope is tied to. I don't know why they did that, other than to imagine, I suppose they might have been a bit sentimental about it all. I don't know. But what you can imagine, because that old beam has seen a lot more hangings than this room has, hasn't it? Because I saw all those old convicts hanging off before it came there. Now, the rope and noose that is attached, you might be looking at that noose and thinking to yourselves, gee, that looks a bit different, that noose, to the one I'm used to seeing. Well, the one we'd be used to seeing would be in movies, wouldn't it? Guys, cowboy movies, westerns, all these things over the years we've watched that might feature a hanging scene. Guys, I've noticed these movies always seem to feature a particular noose. It was called the hangman's noose. And guys, the hangman's noose, of course, was the most commonly used noose. And if you saw it, you'd probably recognise it. Guys, in fact, quite deliberately, it had 13 twirls of rope on the main shaft of the rope. 13 twirls, guys, just above the noose itself, you know, so like a big thick sleeve. Guys, the thing about the hangman's noose, it didn't really work efficiently. I'm afraid it seldom broke anyone's neck, and that's actually the object of the hanging. The hangman's noose tended to choke them to death instead, and I'm afraid rather slowly as well. It was awful. But this noose here that we used, quite the opposite, guys. That is called the British Maritime noose. It's designed to break your C2, C3 vertebrae on impact. Guys, apparently, at least technically, do it in less than 3 seconds. Very efficient. To make it efficient, you need a really good hangman. It's pretty hard to do. It's very tricky. Guys, in this little room, between 1888 when it was built and 1964, the last man was hanged here. 44 people hanged just here where you're standing. Okay, that's only in the modern prison. Now, girls, you might be interested to know one of the 44 was a woman. There's only ever one woman hanged at Fremantle. Name was Martha Rendell, hanged in this room in 1909 for killing 3 of her stepchildren. Guys, the thing is, really, pretty much anyone closely involved in that case at the time were absolutely certain she didn't do it. So there's a very strong doubt she did it at all. Last man hanged in this room, 1964, his name was Eric Cook. Guys, Eric murdered 8 people. He's also found guilty of the attempted murder of another 14, which is why they hanged him. Now, the very last hanging for the whole of Australia was in 1967 in the state of Victoria. If you are from overseas, of course, you might be wondering, does Australia still have death penalties? Well, no, we don't. None of the states do. We haven't had it for a long time. But it's a creepy little room, isn't it? Try coming back at night. You can if you want. We do torchlight tours at night. It's lovely at night. Come and have a look. Thanks guys, I'll just gather you here for a moment. I'm going to stop talking in a minute and you can have a little look around without listening to me for a bit. But guys, look, I'll explain quickly. Before I let you go, I'll explain it. Division 3, biggest division here. And this is where the most violent men were sent. And they were not nice guys in Division 3. Display cells we have for you to look at. Before I let you go and have a look, guys, I'll explain them quickly so it makes sense. 2 cells on that side with the doors open, examples from modern prison of what you call segregation cells. Now, cells all have a peephole in the door, don't they? So the guard can look in and see what you're doing. You might notice when you have a closer look, B50 over there has a much bigger window. It also has a red panic button on the wall in case something goes wrong. It's because it's a suicide watch cell. Okay, not just one of those, there'll be a few of them. B51, when you have a closer look in there, you'll notice this prisoner, he's got a big exercise yard all of his own attached to the back of his cell. Also got a flush toilet instead of a bucket. And it's quite simply because he's an extremely violent man. Or either that, or the nature of his crime means the other guys would love to get him. You keep him separate. It's about keeping separate, guys. He gets his own big exercise yard out the back because you can't let him out to go exercise with the other fellas. He's got a flush toilet, you can't even let him out to empty a bucket. So, not just one of those section 43 cells, there'll be a few. Guys, on this side, chronological progression of cells. Now, the first cell, exactly as yours would have looked if you were a convict sent out from, say, Britain or Ireland in 1852. Tiny little cell with a canvas hammock for your bed. Then it changes over time all through the years down to 1991. So you can see those changes. Guys, the main change really, when the convicts left, knocked a wall out between two tiny convict cells to make a bigger cell. So guys, in the early part of modern prison here, you're quite lucky, nice big cell all to yourself. But of course, over time, further down you'll notice, population gets a lot bigger. So you see two men sharing the same space. You see double-decker bunks, normal thing for modern prison. Do you know, it's interesting, I've been told now on a number of different occasions by ex-prisoners who love to come back and visit this place. They're always coming back to visit. Because quite a few of them have told me that, in their view, one of the most frightening aspects of being in prison is actually the man you share your cell with, if you think about that. Guys, that lovely toilet bucket system we mentioned on the floor of each cell all through the years, right down to 1991, except for one cell. You might notice down there around about 1980, on display is a portable chemical toilet. You know, the sort of thing you might use for camping or caravanning? Porta potties, I think they're called. Guys, look, the prison introduced these little chemical toilets at one stage, and apparently they just thought, well, that'll be much nicer than a bucket. Probably was, wasn't it? Didn't last long, guys. They had to remove those chemical toilets very quickly. Prisoners figured out how to make alcohol out of the chemical in their toilets. They rented their toilets down and drank them. So guys, you have to take them off. Also down there, some lovely artwork, guys. That side, beautiful piece there, one of prisoners painted his entire cell, about 1980, lovely bit of work. Guys, on the other side, another piece of artwork there from 1991, and it's a great example of a local Western Australian Aboriginal art style called Carol. Yeah, I'll look all through these cells.
Oh, they put electrical power plants in.
Sisters didn't like it, and they showed us how much they didn't like it one morning. Guys, in 1988, right here where we're standing in Division 3, a big riot one morning, and the prisoners were basically demonstrating about the lousy conditions there. And it starts off, a couple of guards standing around about here where I am. Audio number 12. Guys, a couple of guards standing around about there. Up there on that first landing were two prisoners whose job it was to distribute the hot tea and coffee. We've got some nice good boiling eggs like water, isn't it? It'll be a rather good idea to tip on top of two guards there who were sworn. All the prisoners ran down and then set fire to the place. Guys, the end result of the fire and the riot is that old photograph up there. Guys, that's Division 3 where we're standing in 1988. And you can see the prisoners did a fair bit of damage, didn't they? Completely gutted Division 3, did a fair bit of damage to Division 4. Now, luckily, no one's killed. The prisoners all ran through the gate to the yard out there, kept out of the fire. Learned some important lessons, though. In the first lesson, they couldn't even get a modern-day fire truck through the front gate. Guys, they couldn't even get in to put the fire out. It exposed all sorts of inefficiencies about the place. And it dawned on them rather quickly that this is ridiculous. It's not a functioning modern prison anymore. We need some new ones. So, guys, they fixed this place up so they could continue to use it over the next 3 years. Division 4 in the changes that. You know, you're not getting out after 10 years on parole like you might today. Guys, you were here for a really long time, and you might be here forever. And I've always thought Division 4 must have been a pretty sad place if you consider a whole bunch of guys are sitting here forever. Okay, let's move on. Probably it's filmed, you might notice it's filmed in this room where we're standing, around about 1985. So guys, real prisoners doing an exercise class in this room. The exercise class is called calisthenics. For anyone who might remember calisthenics from the 1970s and 80s. Guys, the instructor up there, he'd be a prisoner as well, and if a prisoner has a skill of some sort, they like to use him to teach the other fellas. It works very well. So yeah, the main use for this room in modern prison. Guys, this was the prisoners' movie room, and the prisoners love coming to the movies. You can imagine why, of course, can't you? Guys, otherwise you're stuck in one of those yards all week with the scariest men you've ever met in your life, or you're sitting in a tiny cell, come into the movies, well, at least for 2 or 3 hours in your head, you're somewhere else, aren't you? And I think that's why prisoners love movies so much. It's that escape element. It just is something so different. Use the room for other purposes too. You might notice there's a little stage up there. The prisoners would have put on plays and concerts and done things like that as well. And very occasionally they had an entertainer come in. Now, a couple of us here might be old enough to remember an old Australian singer called Johnny O'Keefe. Do you remember Johnny O'Keefe? Do you remember Helen Redden? I Am Woman? She stood there once and sang to the prison. Unusual. So, a few different uses, guys, mostly the movie room. But they actually look pretty fit, don't they? It's be a good class. Okay. Yeah. Guys, this is New Division. A New Division, you might recall, this is the section they started building in 1904 because the population got much bigger. So it's not as old as that section. Guys, so it looks better because it's not as old. I think it looks better too because it has lovely turquoise coloured doors. Well, isn't it amazing the difference a bit of colour makes? And a mural up there, guys, a couple of prisoners painted around about 1989, just makes it look a bit better, doesn't it? Now, main use of New Division in the modern era. This is where they kept prisoners whose crimes were fairly small. Now it's going to be a sentence of less than 5 years, probably more than 1 year, less than 5. So it's actually quite small stuff. But oddly, they kept those prisoners whose crimes were quite small right next door to some other prisoners who are at the other end of the scale. Guys, down there behind the wire mesh fence on the bottom floor, that's death row. So that's where the guys who were waiting to be hanged were sitting, right next door to the fellas whose crimes were very small. It seemed like an odd mix. But anyway, that's what they did. Another use of the New Division during the Second War, 1940s. Australian Army took over New Division, moved all the prisoners out, squatted them next door. They used this as a military fire in the riot in 1988. 12 ringleaders after the fire, they were kept behind that wire mesh fencing down the side there, the 12 ringleaders as punishment were kept in there too, so it had that other use. Okay, let's go and look at the women's prison. Just around the corner.
Alright guys, we're going to the women's prison now.
Come on in. Now the women's prison. That's that taller red brick building over there. It's this building behind me. Round the side the girls had their laundries. Women's prison from 1890 to 1970. So up to a fairly modern time. I think I mentioned before though, never more than say a maximum of 60 girls. So it's pretty small. But the very sad thing about the women's prison also was that the crimes the girls committed were also extremely small. We'll go inside in a minute, I'll tell you about that. Now, a bit of change around the women's prison. Tall red brick building over there, about 2 years ago, was converted by Youth Hostels Australia to accommodation, which means you can stay here. Guys, you don't have to have a toilet bucket anymore either. It's all new stuff. It's very nice, and that's why you see people sitting out the back. Okay? So, it's nice, isn't it? Is it nice in there? So you can stay here, guys. This bit behind me has not changed, so we'll go and have a look, tell you about some of those crimes. Girls, that's a number of say you would have had, say, in 1970. It's a bit like the men, I suppose, isn't it? Same sort of bucket system too, please. One slight difference, girls, on the way through, you might notice in the corner there was a little bathtub. Did you notice that? Yeah, that's one slight difference. The male prisoners used to go to communal showers 3 times a week. Bathtub system for girls, so slightly different. Now, the crimes though were very small. We're talking also, we're talking modern prison here. Okay, it's not convict time, 1920s, 30s, 40s. On the wall, guys, these are crime sheets, records of individual girls who might have been in and out of here lots of times over the years for the most ridiculously small things. Now this girl, let's take her as an example. There's a photograph of her, name was Minnie Forrester. Here's some of Minnie's shocking crimes. Guys, for vagrancy, that's the crime. For being a homeless person, she got 2 months in prison. That was the crime. Here's a great crime. For being idle and disorderly, she got 2 months in prison. I reckon about 99% of Perth have been in there, including me. For being drunk, she got a week for being drunk. For using obscene language, guys, for swearing, she got a week. It's pretty small, isn't it? This girl, stealing isn't common. This girl here stole some vegetables. She got 3 months. The girl down there stole some shoes for a little kid. She got 3 months. It's pretty small stuff, isn't it? This girl spent quite literally over the years. She was here lots of times. One main crime was for being drunk. Well, eventually wrote habitual drunk. But all the usual other stuff too, vagrancy, being disorderly. But yeah, a lot of it drunk. It's quite sad actually, isn't it? Yeah. The female matron ran the place, female staff, maybe that made it a bit better. When the girls left here in 1970, this became the male prisoners' art rooms. So it's had a couple of different lives in that sense. They'd come over here and learn how to paint. But I always thought the crime was pretty small. Very minor indeed, isn't it? Okay, guys, let's just head back through that door, through that little gate. Just wait for the other side. You get locked in, at least you've got a bath.
There's a water. It's only got a cold tap though.
I just done the behind bar tours and really amazing. So there's plenty of tour here that I haven't done yet. So it's my first time to do it today, guys. So I did like a general information about the prison. So it's called the behind bars tour. So yeah. So thank you for watching my video, guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.